Today I want to take a few minutes and talk about preparing the budget. Now, this is a very important topic because as you go through this course, one of the things that you'll be asked to do is to prepare a 5-year budget for your school, whether that be a high school or whether that be an elementary school or a middle school. Now, when you look at your budgets, there are certain things that you must include in your planning process. Your textbook refers to descriptive narratives, program identifiers, mission statement, academic action or improvement plans, personnel requests, salary distribution, restricted funds, budget coding. All of those are important concepts, but I want to try to refine it a little bit for our purposes today. If you're preparing a budget for your school, and let me first take an elementary school, you need to take a look at a number of data points. The first is enrollment. What is your enrollment per grade? What do you anticipate your losses in student enrollment to be in a particular year, as well as the increases? Now, if you're in an elementary school, and it's a parish elementary school, one of the things that might be helpful is to look at the baptism rates. How many children are being baptized? In your particular school, you might want to say, okay, what percentage of those individuals who were baptized into our Catholic faith community in the parish, how many of those do you anticipate coming to your school in 3, 4, or 5 years? You also have to look at your tuition projections. What do you project your tuition to be? Where has it been? When you look at that, you need to see, has your tuition been flat? Have you been simply asking parents to pay 2 or 3% increases every year? Or has there been a spike? Those are important things because you need to look at the trends. If you are trending upward, that's great. Maybe your parents are automatically attuned to, okay, we're going to be going up even more next year in terms of the percentage. But maybe you're going to say, this year we're going to hold the line. Now, in addition to taking a look at tuition projections, you need to take a look at salary projections. Now, that means taking a look at your staff. How many positions will you need? Is anybody leaving? If you're going to fill that position, do you anticipate getting someone at a lesser salary? Or are you going to make sure that your budget stays the same? Or perhaps you're losing a young teacher who has a small impact on your budget. Then you suddenly know that there's someone out there that's a great science or math teacher, but you know that you're going to be paying a lot more for that individual. Make sure that you allot for that money in your salary projection. So you need to go position by position and determine exactly what it is that you'll be spending your money on. You also need to do that same thing in terms of your staff, your support staff, your maintenance staff, and your administrative staff. How many positions will you need? And what is the dollar amount attached to each one of those? Those are important things to consider. You also need to consider capital improvements. Do you need to repair the roof? Do you need to purchase new desks? Do you need new tile, new carpeting, new water fountains, new kitchen equipment? Do you need new shades in your classroom? Do you need additional security systems put in? You need to make sure that you look at your needs, and again, that should be reflected in the school strategic plan. You also need to look at major technology expenses. Is your school going to give every student an iPad? Do you need to give every one of your teachers an iPad? Do you need to add smart boards or that type of technology to all of your classrooms. Those are expensive propositions that you need to make sure that you cover in your budget. Too often people forget about those things. So you also need to consider things like testing fees, book fees. Do you charge a book rental fee? Many schools do. What is your financial aid? Do you have tuition reimbursement programs for your faculty and staff? How much support, if any, are you getting from your parish? Is your parents' organization anticipated to provide a certain number of dollars? If you have an alumni organization, what about student fundraising? What about special fundraising? Does your school have bingo? Do you have income from an endowment in your school? In terms of fundraising, what about gifts or donations? Do you have an annual fund program? Do you rent your facilities? What income will you be generating from that? Oftentimes, schools also get what they call refunds from insurance carriers. So if a student buys a health insurance plan, the school might get $2 for every student who enrolls. Stores like Walmart and Target have programs where you can get a certain amount of money back based upon expenditures made by families. Are you including that in your budget? What about publications? Often this is overlooked. Are you sending out a monthly newsletter? What about your website? Has that been updated? What about religious activities? The costs of having school-wide liturgies. What costs are associated with those that you might be responsible for? What about graduations? Every time you have an 8th grade graduation or kindergarten graduation, there is a dollar amount that is attached to that because it costs money. Are you getting any income from student activity fees that are charged to students? If you have an athletic program, again, do you charge students fees for that? What about concessions? If you have different activities, perhaps a cheerleading competition, what is the anticipated income from those concessions? What about food service, your cafeteria? In your textbook, you also learned about making sure that you budget for those. What about the cost of that? How much is a school making? Too often schools overlook that. In one school I know, when we really started looking at their budget, they were losing $25,000 a year. $25,000 a year because people weren't really keeping tabs on how much was being spent to run the cafeteria and provide food for the students. That's an expensive loss. Does your school have any vending machines? Now, in today's world, a lot of vending machines have been pulled, but if you have water, or if you have fruit juices or milk, do you get any kind of funding from those? Now, in expenses, you're looking at administrative expenses, clerical support expenses. You're looking at advertising. How do you advertise your school? Too often we forget that advertising is an important factor. How can people come to your school if they don't know you exist? And in many cases, there's a large population that knows very little about you because we as Catholics, we just didn't tell people about ourselves. And we'll talk about that later in the course regarding fundraising and marketing and institutional advancement concepts. But what do you spend on postage and printing and duplicating? What about professional development for your faculty? What about little things like telephone? How much does it really cost to have all of those telephone lines? Does your school have cable TV? Do you get charged for that? If the school has any vehicles, what about the repair costs? If your school has a bus, you know exactly what I'm talking about because it costs a lot to operate a bus each year. Now, In banking now, in many parishes, the parish itself does the banking, so the school really doesn't deal with the banking. But in many schools, you do. And what are your banking fees? Banking fees can add up if you're not careful. If you allow your families to pay tuition with a credit card, and many parishes do you realize that you're losing 2.5%? Because that's the charge that the credit card company is charging you to process that. Now, maybe that's fine, but it's something to consider. Now, in some jurisdictions, faculty members who leave can get paid out for accrued sick leave. Somebody retires and they have 2 years of sick leave. You have to pay them at the time of their retirement 2 years of their salary. Are you prepared to do that? Now, what about instructional supplies? All those little things that go into making a classroom operational. What about standardized testing? How much are you spending per child? Now, in many schools, there is a diocesan marketing fee, and it's done per student. Is that calculated in? What about the amount of money to operate your school's library, for books, for periodicals, for new AV equipment? Then you come into the area of janitorial services. How much does it cost to keep your building clean? Now, maybe you have an outside contractor, but you probably also have someone that's there on staff that you pay. You have to make sure that you consider that. Now, what about things like gas, oil, electric, water? Do you pay that, or does the parish pay that? You have to make sure that you know that going into your budget preparation process. Now, earlier in this course, I talked about benefits. You need to make sure that you consider health care benefits, retirement. You're required to have disability insurance, workman's compensation, and again, looking at your pension plan for your faculty and staff. What is it? Now, when you look at all of those different things, you also have to make sure that you consider any new construction or new programs that are added in. When you add all those up, you should have a solid budget if you've done your homework and prepared for making the budget by collecting the necessary data involving the stakeholders. In this course, you'll be asked to put all that together because that's what we've been leading up to. Making sure that you, as the head of the school, understand the financial responsibilities that are on your plate. Do you know how to do a budget? And can you give a strong rationalization for that budget based upon your school's mission and your vision for the school? If you do that, and you involve the stakeholders sharing that budget with faculty, staff, and parents, alumni, it's not really a big deal. Why? Because they'll know your priorities. They'll know that you've done your homework. And they'll know that you are being the best possible steward of the money that has been given to you to educate the children in your school. I hope these thoughts and comments help. If you have any questions or thoughts, as always, please feel free to contact me, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I appreciate it, and have a great day.